The Rebbe teaches us that at every gathering, when people get together, the opening remarks, the opening words should be words of Torah. Pesach Devarecho Yo'iru, it says in Tehillim, that the opening of your word should be Yo'iru, should illuminate, should bring light. And what are those words? And what is that brings light to the world? Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah. Every mitzvah is compared to a candle that brings light into the world, and the Torah is even greater. It's oil. So therefore, the Rebbe said that the opening words should be words of Torah, and if possible, it should be connected to the parsha of the week, to the seder that we learn on the week. This Shabbos is Shabbos from Kabbalah HaTorah. We have a pasuk in the parsha that precedes the whole idea, the whole inyan of Kabbalah HaTorah, and it says as follows: Vayemer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he tells him, Hineni bo elecha bi'av ha'onon. I am going to reveal myself to you in the thickness, so to say, of the cloud. V'shom mi ha'om bedabri imoch. The people will hear the way I speak to you, and as a result of that, is v'gam b'cho yaminu lo'olam, and as a result, the people will have faith emunah in you. What is the concept of emunah? When we apply the concept, the approach to any subject and the union by way of faith, when we have a certain idea, we have a certain situation, and we have two alternatives. We are trying to explain and understand what this is, why it's so, and so forth and so on. And then sometimes we have such situation which we have no explanation. Either we discard it, we disregard it, or we accept it by way of faith. When it comes to Hashem, it's obvious that there's no way to explain Hashem. It's above and beyond all comprehension, all capability of the intellectual capacities that we possess to try to explain Hashem. The only way we could accept Hashem is by way of emunah, by faith. So what does the Torah tell? What does Hashem tell Moshe Rabbeinu? As a result of this, that the Yidden will hear the way I speak to you, that's going to cause v'gam b'cho ya'aminu. They're going to start believing you. That means their approach to Moshe Rabbeinu is going to be not they could understand Moshe Rabbeinu. He is beyond all explanation, and we accept him only by way of emunah. And here comes a question. This was said a day or two before Matan Torah. 6 weeks prior, before that, we have a pasuk which we say every single day in the davening. After the Kriyas Yamsuf, it says, Vaya Yisrael Nasayot Agadela She'osa Hashem Mitzrayim. The people saw the great hand, the great accomplishment, the great nisim, the floys, miracles that Hashem did, and therefore is Vayaminu B'Hashem Uve Moshe Avdei, that this brought about this cause that the Yidden should have a strong belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but V'gam B'Moshe Avdei, also in Moshe Rabbeinu. And it is interesting, Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rashbi, wrote a Perush, an interpretation of Chumash Bereish Shmois, which is called the Mechilta the Rashbi. When it comes to this pasuk in Pasha B'Shalach, where it says, Vayaminu B'Hashem Uve Moshe Avdei, with Vav HaMechaber, says the Rashbi as follows: He who believes in Moshe Rabbeinu, it's considered that he believes in Hashem. Who does not believe in Moshe Rabbeinu, says the Rashbi, it's considered that he does not believe in Hashem. In other words, the Pasha B'Shalach is telling a Yid that the only way you can accept Moshe Rabbeinu is by way of belief. If that's the case, why is it that 6 weeks later, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to come again and tell Moshe Rabbeinu that he's going to speak to him and the people are going to hear? And as a result of, they're going to believe in you. They already are believing from 6 weeks before. It says, so what is the Torah? What is HaKadosh Baruch Hu adding something new to Moshe which he already possesses? And here the Rebbe gives a very interesting explanation which gives us a better idea, a better approach, what it means to have belief in Moshe Rabbeinu. When we learned the Posek and Pasha B'Shalach, it says before that, Vaya Yisrael Esayot Lagodeilah Asher Osa Hashem B'Mitzrayim. The Eden saw the great miracle. And as a result of that miracle, that caused and that brought about that there should be the Emunah in Hashem and also the Emunah in Moshe Rabbeinu. When we come to Pasha Yisrael, when we come to prepare ourselves for Kabbalah Satera, we have to receive the Torah, and one of the conditions that HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up, that we should be able and we should be worthy of receiving the Torah, it has to be Gam B'chol Yaminu Lo'olam. What does Hashem tell Moshe Rabbeinu in Pasha Yisrael? What's going to bring about, what's going to cause by the Emunah Moshe, not because of the miracles that he performed, not because of the great things that he performed, just for one other thing. V'shomi ha'om b'dabli imoch. The Eden are going to see that you are the one to whom I speak. You are the one who transmit my words like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shechina medaberes mitech Greiner Shalom Moshe, I would say to Sel. The Shechina speaks from the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a whole different understanding what Moshe Rabbeinu is. The greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu is not because he performs miracles. The greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu is because he has what we call today this hotline, this open line, as Rashi brings it down in a few places. And Rashi says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to speak to Moshe Rabbeinu, he speaks to Hashem, Hashem speaks to Moshe, and when Moshe wants to speak to Hashem, he speaks to Hashem. That's a whole different understanding and appreciation what we mean when we speak about Moshe Rabbeinu. Then comes the Zohar, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and the Zohar says, "Is pashtusa de Moshe b'chol dora v'dora." There is a spark, there's an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu in every single generation. What does that mean? That there is a Yid, there is an individual in every generation, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses him, that in his neshama, HaKadosh Baruch Hu inserts a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama. And therefore that Yid is considered the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation. And then we have what our sages tell us, when you hold something, even you hold a very, very small portion of it, but actually you're holding the whole thing. Although we say that Eivish only gives a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama into the tzaddik, but as we have this rule, if you have only part of it, you have the entire object, the higher system. So we made from this we understand that B'shas Yid has in him a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama. He actually has the whole neshama in him. And therefore, all these concepts that we speak about, what the Torah tells us about Moshe Rabbeinu, that applies in every generation to the Moshe Rabbeinu of that generation, as the Rashbi says. So Mela B'Shas, we are now in the week, coming just from Asura B'Shvat to 10th of Shvat, which marks the Hilula, the yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe, and what's closer to home, that this is the day when the Rebbe was elevated, and he became the Rebbe of the generation. He became the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation. So we have to know that Moshe Rabbeinu is the same Moshe Rabbeinu who lived 3,000 years ago, he has that same neshama. And therefore, we have to understand that the only way we could approach, we could accept Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation is not through understanding, not through explanation, not through intellect, but just like the first Moshe Rabbeinu, the only way to approach him, to accept him, was through Vayaminu Moshe, that he had the emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was promised him. V'gam b'choya aminu, the Eden. So we have to know, what is that important? That just like Mishas Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Yidden what to do, so it says that they accepted it by way of Kabbalah's oil. They didn't try to understand why they are being told to do it. They're doing it just because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it, and how did they know? It was said through Moshe Rabbeinu. Similarly, when we hear things from our Moshe Rabbeinu, from our generation, we have to accept it by way of Shechina Medaberes Mitaykrenu Shal Moshe, that this is being said to us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, but it's being transmitted through the voice, through the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu. And this should help us, that as we came now from the Asiri B'Shvat, and the Rebbe says that that is a time that we have to strengthen our Emunah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and according to Chassidus, that the Yontif of Chamisha Osher B'Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, which this is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilonis, that this is the Rosh Hashanah for trees, and what is the tree? The true tree, says the Gemara, the true tree, that's the Talmud Chochem. So when we come now from Chamisha Osher B'Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, that, according to Chassidim from all the generations, is an opportune time to strengthen our connection, our hiskashrus to the Rebbe, which means that we should learn more and more the Rebbe's teachings, we should follow more and more the Rebbe's guidance, and the more we're going to do that, we're assured that eventually, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, as we just heard in the Maimer, was the seventh generation after Avraham Avinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who brought the Shekhinah to this physical world. Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who built the Mishkan, and when it says, "Va'osu li mikdash v'shachanti b'soichom," that Moshe Rabbeinu brought the Shekhinah into this physical world, and similarly, being that the Rebbe is the seventh generation from the Alter Rebbe, so he is also the one that is going to bring down the Shekhinah, as we see actually it's taking place. That there's not a corner in the world today we don't have the inyan of Kedusha, we don't have the spark of godliness. Every place you go, there was never a Hanukkah since the time of Hanukkah and the time of Hashmonaim that the whole world should be lit up with Hanukkah licht as this year. Every shaliach in every part of the world lit up candles, not only for himself, but he had many others who were the same. And this is what is, we have to understand that this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing in our generation, bringing down godliness, Kedusha, into this physical world. And just like the first Moshe Rabbeinu was the one for also a mikdash, the Shechante B'Seichom, so will it be with our generation that our Rebbe, our Moshe Rabbeinu, will build the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, which will never be destroyed, Chas v'Sholem, and we will have the Shechante B'Seichom. We will seek HaKadosh in this world, and Hashem should bless us that it should be, as the Rebbe always used to express himself, Takif umiyad mamish, immediately. Entschuldigung von der Zeit.
L'chaim. To say this is an honor is an understatement, Reb Label. Everybody in this room, you're synonymous. When we saw the Rebbe, we saw you. Many of us have merited to Farbrengen with you. Many of us have merited to hear Hayros from the Rebbe through you, myself, my father, my family, my wife's family, and everybody in this room. So to say that it's a unique honor to sit here is an understatement. Your family comes from the Alter Rebbe. Your mother
Yeah.
is Einikul of the
Rebbe Shimon
Rebbe.
Mittel Rebbe's daughter.
When did they come to America? Your
My
family?
father was sent to America by the previous Rebbe in 1922. And he thought he would be coming for 2 years and go back to Yerushalayim where he lived with my mother. And when it came to the end of the 2 years, the Rebbe Rayatz, the Frierdiker Rebbe, sent him a message: you should bring your family to America because I want you to remain in America. So it was in 1923, 24, my mother came with a few children that she had already in Eretz Yisrael, 4 children which she had. What?
They don't hear.
They don't hear. So what should I do?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Here's the mechanic.
Yeah.
I'm not holding it right.
No. Okay.
You hear me better now?
In 1922, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Groner's father, came at the request of the Frierdiker Rebbe to America. He thought he'd be from Eretz Yisrael, from Yerushalayim. Rabbi Groner's mother is an Einikul of the Mittel Rebbe. And her name was Menucha Rachel, correct?
The Mittel Rebbe sent her to Eretz Yisrael to Hebron.
Correct.
And that's why our family, my mother's family, her grandfather and her father, she was all born in Eretz Yisrael.
And then after 2 years, the Frierdiker Rebbe directed your father not to come home, but to bring his family to America. But you were born in America. You were born in America. Do you remember? I mean, I'm sure you do, but what are your? It was a unique situation. You're an Einikul. Your father's a Chassidish Yid. Your mother comes from a Chabad family. When the Frierdiker Rebbe was coming to America finally in 1940, what were your feelings? How did you feel about that?
I was a very young boy then, and it was hard for me to happen. But my father was what we would call a very strong, devoted chassid of the Rebbe, to the extent that 1 month after Asiri B'Shvat, in Tovshin Yud, when the Rebbe was in Stalvik, one night my father suffered a very severe heart attack as a result of the fact that he didn't have the Rebbe with him.
Oh, wow.
And then later he became a very strong chassid of the Rebbe. And the home, so it was imbued with the whole concept of my father. We used to walk. We lived a half an hour away from 770, and we used to walk Yontif 6 times.
You lived in Brownsville, correct?
Brownsville, yeah. So we were very close, and of course my mother was brought up in a family that they were brought up by the Tzemach Tzedek, her grandfather, grandmother. So the whole environment was what she inherited from Tzemach Tzedek's home, and that's how it was in our home.
So that's a very unique connection. There weren't many.
What's being said?
They're complaining that they can't hear, so they want to hear you.
Get me a microphone.
Ritzeineinu lishmaya.
Bring me a microphone.
Maybe, perhaps, yeah.
I don't need it.
I think that. Okay.
I was saying that the Mittel Rebbe, one of his daughters was named the Rebbe Menucha Rachel. At one time, the Mittel Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek called her and said, I want you to move to Hebron in Eretz HaKodesh. While they were getting prepared, the Mittel Rebbe was nostalgic. A short while after, the Tzemach Tzedek, who was her brother-in-law, because the Tzemach Tzedek's wife was the sister of the Rebbe Menucha Rachel, so the Tzemach Tzedek called her and said that according to what he has now, a message from his shver, from her father, that now is the time for her to move to Eretz Yisrael. And by the way, she tells him it's raining outside now. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, so you walk between the drops. And from then on, whenever she walked in a rain, she never became wet. She was always walking, always between the drops. So when she moved to Eretz Yisrael, her children, her grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, they were all born in Eretz Yisrael, born in Hebron. My father's grandfather came from Poland and lived in Yerushalayim, and that's how the shidduch took place between my father. So my father was born in Yerushalayim, and my mother was born in Hebron. And that's how, and then as I mentioned that in 1922, what was in 1922, the Friedrich Rebbe asked my father to come to America. He gave him a certain mission to do, and my father thought it was going to be only for 2 years. And when the 2 years were over, and the Rebbe Ratz told him, now bring your family to the United States, because I want you to be here to continue the work that you're doing till now. And so my mother came with 4 children that were born, 2 in Hebron and 2 in Yerushalayim. And when they came to America, 4 other children, and I was one of the 4 that were born here. So that's part of the history of the family.
When did your connection with our Rebbe start?
Okay. I'm a little bit embarrassed to speak about this. There was one evening, it was in Tovshin Tes, it was the end of 1947, 48. I was then 19 years old. I was sitting in the yeshiva. I don't say I was learning, but I said I was sitting in the yeshiva. And after the Seder of Chassidus, which was 9:30, was over, the Rebbe came into the Zal, into the yeshiva, and he comes over to me, and he says, I would like to see you for a few minutes in my office. Although he was not a Rebbe, but we knew how great he was in every aspect. And I started to shiver. What does a person like him need a 90-year-old kid to come into his office? But the Gemara says, "Ein mesarvin legodel." You don't say refuse a great person. So I came into his office. So the Rebbe tells me as follows. In the course of the 9-10 years since I'm here, a lot of work accumulated on different subjects. And I don't have the sufficient time, so to say, to devote myself to certain subjects which I would want to expand more. I would want that you should take some of those subjects that I'm involved in, you take it over, and as freeing me from that work, I will be able to devote those hours to these subjects that I'm interested in trying to develop more. He was not a Rebbe yet, so I was able to speak chutzpahdik to him. So I asked him, are you making a joke of me? You want a 19-year-old boy to take over your work? What does that mean? At any rate, the Rebbe insisted that I should try it for 3 months.
Okay.
And after 3 months, he said, we'll sit down. It's not working.
It was working, it was working.
No.
I guess it's the battery. Maybe. Okay.
Where did you stop hearing at that point?
No, right. A few seconds ago, you asked the Rebbe, you want a 19-year-old bacher to work on important.
When the Rebbe suggested and asked that I should take over some of his work, and he wasn't, the Rebbe yet was able to speak a bisschen, nicht der Cheretznik, as we call it. So I asked him, are you taking a 19-year-old kid, a 19-year-old bacher, and he's going to take over your work? So I'm not going to go over to the details what he said. At the end was that he said, listen, take it for a 3-month trial. After 3 months, we'll sit down. I'll tell you if I'm satisfied. You'll tell me if you feel okay. So I said, look, I have to do it because the Chazal said, as I mentioned before, you can't refuse a godel. But I want to make one condition. It should not interfere with the Seder of learning of the yeshiva, which means I have to be in the yeshiva at 7:30 in the morning, and I finish 9:30 at night. During that period, I will not have the ability to take care of it. He said, no, I will not interfere. After 9:30, when you have time, we'll take care of it. It's okay. So I started working. The condition did not help because a number of times the Rebbe would come in the afternoon into the Zal, into the yeshiva, and walk over to the Rosh Yeshiva. Please do me a favor. Give permission to so-and-so to come to my office. I have very urgent work I have to take care of. So, after 3 months, I was waiting for the Rebbe to say, no, let's sit down and we'll discuss it. No meeting. Not only that, every day he added on more work. And that's how the thing continued. Then, this was a year and a half before the Histalkus, the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The day the Rebbe was installed on Shabbos, the Levaya was on a Sunday, and Monday morning the Rebbe called me, and he told me these words: now your work is going to be completely different than it was till now. And he didn't elaborate what that meant, but I felt that he trying to tell me that now it's going to be a work for a Rebbe, not for a Rebbe's son-in-law. Wow. So that's, and then I was still not married. We first got married in Tov Yudal in 1954, and this was 1950-51. And so it developed so that I was working for the Rebbe of fin 19 Tovshin Tes, Baruch Hashem, till this very day, Leirach Yom. I have mine.
What type of work did the Rebbe start you off with? When you said the Rebbe wanted
what I started off was, the Rebbe was the one, when he came to America, initiated this whole idea of publishing the teachings, the works, the Maimorim, the Sichos of the Rabbeim, starting from the Alter Rebbe and especially from his father-in-law. The first job that he gave me was that I should start preparing the material that has to be published. I should check it out, see that it's printed, and take care of that department. And then there would be, I think, people ask questions, to give over the questions, give over the answers. But my main work in the first year and a half, was to prepare the publishing of the Sfarim of the Rabbeim. That was the first job.
Well, I was going to get to this later, but as long as you're bringing it up now, it's a personal interest of mine. You authored many works of Torah for the Rebbe. You authored Mar Mekaymis Na'aris on the Kutei Torah, and Torah Oyer, and other beautiful Svarim. Primarily, what I'm personally fascinated by is that you were a co-author of Sefer HaMinhagim, the customs of Chabad.
Yeah.
How involved was the Rebbe in Sefer HaMinhagim?
Huh?
How involved was the Rebbe in, first of all, in what you wrote? Because you wrote a lot of very deep Torah thoughts, especially the Aris and Mar Mekaymis and Kutei Torah, but primarily for this crowd, maybe it's better, the Minhagim, the customs. That's the foundation, the backbone of Chabad.
Okay. The Rebbe started...
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Huh?
The ladies want to see you better. So they're asking if you can maybe... I'm sorry, I'm schuldig. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm schuldig, yeah. Shekayach. Shekayach.
First of all, in 1943 in Tovshin Gimel, the previous Rebbe asked the Rebbe to give out a calendar, which is now known as Hayom Yom. I'm not going to go into all the details what the Rebbe wanted, the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted about, but one thing that the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted, as it's printed on the fourth page, he wanted that he should publicize the Bavashim Minhagim. Every group, every Kehila has their Minhagim, and there's a whole Shaila Pi Halacha. If you belong to Ashkenaz, are you allowed to do Minhag Sfard? If you're Sfardi, if you're allowed to do Minhag Ashkenaz. And so, different groups have their Minhagim, and the previous Rebbe wanted that he should put together the Minhagim, and that should become the set of Minhagim for Chabad. Then, as the Rebbe started publishing the mamorim in small pamphlets, which we call Kontreisen, from the Frierdiker Rebbe, he would add, when it became a yontif, he would add on more minhagim, which was not included in the Hayom Yom. Then the Rebbe wanted we should give out a book, a sefer, which should be called Sefer HaMinhagim, and in that sefer we should have all the minhagim that relate to a chosid from the moment that he's born to kach v'kach. So Rabbi Groner and myself were appointed by the Rebbe to edit and put together that sefer, which we did mainly by putting together all the minhagim which were printed in Hayom Yom and later in the Kontreisim. But as time went on, there were other minhagim that were never published. So we would sit down and we would write up all those minhagim for each yontif. How much the Rebbe was involved in the Sefer HaMinhagim, there wasn't a line in Sefer HaMinhagim, both in the Sefer itself and in the commentaries, in the Ha'oris, and the Maramikaimis, that the Rebbe did not edit every single line. Wow. I still have in my possession those pages with the Ksaviyat Kodesh, where the Rebbe made the changes, he added and made changes. Every line in Sefer HaMinhagim was checked out by the Rebbe. Every line in the Maramikaimis was checked by the Rebbe. There were certain minhagim which I put in because I saw the Rebbe used to conduct himself, and the Rebbe crossed it out. Like it's what? Not for everybody, it's only for myself. And so the Rebbe went through. So if you want to know, the Sefer HaMinhagim is a sefer which was edited word by word, line by line by the Rebbe himself, both in the sefer itself and also in the Mekaymis that's on the bottom.
Can I ask you, if you recall offhand, a minhag that you put in that the Rebbe took out, or vice versa, that the Rebbe that you didn't put in and the Rebbe wanted in?
I don't like to speak about those things.
Okay. I could try. How was it working for the Rebbe?
Huh?
How was it? How did it feel? The transition. You were a bacher. You were a yeshiva bacher. How was it, the transition, working not for the previous Rebbe's son-in-law, but for the Rebbe now?
Rabbi, this is such a type of question which a person cannot relate to others. It's a personal feeling that someone has. Okay.
Looks, yeah. L'chaim. L'chaim. L'chaim.
Sorry about that. The mic stand easier for you?
With permission of the rabbi, if I was sitting in the audience, I would ask a few questions.
When
we speak about an individual who had, as every other person, has his personal life and how he relates to others. People want to know more about, as much as is permitted to discuss, about the Rebbe's personal life. What does that mean? How many hours a day, literally, without exaggeration, did the Rebbe work every single day? From our experience, 18 hours a day. And the Rebbe worked 24, 7, 30. You're going to ask me, what does it mean, 24? The Rebbe would leave. In the beginning, when the Rebbe became a Rebbe, till his mother passed away in Tafshin Chav Hei, the Rebbe would have what we call Yechidus, private audiences, 3 times a week, Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. The Yechidus would start 8 o'clock in the morning, and it would end it at various different times. There were times that finished at 1 o'clock. There were times that it finished 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. After the Rebbe's mother passed away, the Rebbe said he has time only for Sunday and Thursday. Every night when the Rebbe left, he would go home with homework. What does that mean, homework? The Rebbe didn't have enough time to answer all the letters that came. And by the way, one of the questions that they put down, approximately how many letters a day did the Rebbe receive? The postmaster used to bring in 2 sacks of letters almost every day. In addition to that, people would come into the office and bring notes. In addition to that, the fellow telephone never stopped from the whole world, asking blessings and brachos and asking for atzos and everything else. So when the Rebbe came in the morning, if it's no Yechidus night, he would go home 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, went home with a sack like this, with the mail that he did not have enough time to take care in the office. When the Rebbe came the next morning, 10:30, there was a stack of mail like this, which the Rebbe answered during the night. The Rebbetzin told us that after a few years, when she realized that the Rebbe is only sleeping 3-4 hours a night, she said, she told him one time, if you're going to continue this way, where are you going to get the power, the koyach, to continue? And you know what the Rebbe answered her? Please. That's what she told us. The Rebbe said, come into my office. She said, we came into the office, and the Rebbe says, give a look, what's on my desk? A stack of mail of people waiting to get answers. And these are the words she said, the Rebbe told me, du willst, als ihr soll liegen im Bett schlafen und sie sollen warten. You want that I shall lay in bed and sleep, and these people have to wait for answers? Nothing doing. After 10 years of such work, the secretaries had a meeting that we have to suggest to the Rebbe he should take a 2-week vacation. And we made a 2-week vacation. We found a place at the very end of Long Island, and we told the Rebbe we will hire a place over there. He and the Rebbe shall be there. We'll make a shul that 3 times a day there'll be a minyan to daven, but after the minyan is off, they get lost. The Rebbe would have a mikveh, and the Rebbe should have a 2-week vacation to rest himself from the whole world. And the Rebbe tells the secretary who went in to speak to him, I want to ask you a question. How many pieces of mail, averagely, is brought into my office every day? He said between 200 and 250 in addition. You want that for 2 weeks, I will not get the mail, I will not get any telephone calls, I will not get any notes, and after the 2 weeks are over, I'm coming back to my office, and you're going to bring in all these sacks of mail, and you're going to tell me people are waiting for answers. You call that a vacation? The Rebbe said. The Rebbe would not think about himself at all. The Rebbetzin said, my husband did not leave for himself even so much. Everything that he possesses, he gives away to Chassidim. When I said before 24, when the Rebbe went home 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, he told us, if an emergency comes from any part of the world, you have permission to call at the house. Either the Rebbetzin will pick up the phone or I'll pick up the phone. The Rebbetzin called. He said, do not hesitate. If there is a dire situation which you need an answer or bracha right away, please call. The phone would ring twice and it was picked up right away. 24 hours a day. When I said 7, I once said this to a group about the Matam. Oh, I thought the Rebbe was a Shabbos observant person. How could you say that he was working 7 hours, 7 days a week? I said, you have a very good question. Well, let me ask you something. Do you know what type of office the Rebbe had? Was it a real estate office? Was it a stock market office? Was it a business office? What kind of office did he have? He had an office of davening, learning, trying to help people, advice, giving brachas to people. And the Rebbe told us, on Yom Kippur, if an emergency arises, chas v'sholem, you'll have permission during the intermission between Musaf and Mincha, when we always have intermission, come into the office and tell me what the problem is, and you'll get an answer. On Yom Kippur, the Rebbe availed himself. The same thing is, there was not a time that the Rebbe said, I have no time to answer. This is what the Rebbe devoted himself to Chassidim. As the Rebbe said, he committed himself entirely to Chassidim. And this was once discussed by Farbrengen with our elder Chassid. And the elder Chassid, after he described this, he stopped and he cried. He stopped crying and says, I'm asking myself, is there any time that we reciprocate to the Rebbe to give of ourselves, to give up something to do what the Rebbe wants? Are you ready to stop eating? Are you ready to stop going places? Are you ready to do this, to give up this, give up this? Why? Because the Rebbe asked you should do miftzoyim. The Rebbe asked you should learn. Are you ready to do that? It's not a one-way street, he said. It's a two-way street. And by that Farbrengen, he said, I'm not having any complaints to anybody. I'm just discussing it. I would want that each and every one in his private room ask himself, here we have a Reed that devotes himself completely to us, doesn't think about himself, doesn't think about his eating and drinking. He stays out to over 7, 8 hours. That day is a fast day by him till he comes home. He's completely devoted. Are we showing something to the Rebbe of what he expects of us? And it's for our favor. The Rebbe doesn't need it. It's for us. Are we reciprocating, giving up something of ourselves to do for the Rebbe? This has to be some of the questions that should be discussed. This should be some of the ideas should be discussed. Excuse me, I'm continuing. A gentleman about Tshuva went into the Rebbe and he said, you know, Chassidim don't ask the Rebbe questions, but I come from a world we were constantly asking our professors, our leaders, and with the Rebbe's permission, I have a few questions if the Rebbe would allow me to ask. And the Rebbe said, be my guest, so to say. Ask what you want. He says, I understand that there isn't a subject that is not brought to the Rebbe's attention, and the Rebbe is able to answer on all different subjects. I want to know, how is that possible? We know we have people who specialize in this field, specialize in that field, so when I have to have advice, I want to know something about electricity, I'll go to an electrician. I want to know something about medicine, I'll go to a doctor. How is it that people come to the Rebbe on every aspect, whatever it may not be, and the Rebbe answers them? And the Rebbe said, when you go and people come to ask, you try to put yourself in that individual situation, and together with that, you try to be objective. You try to remove yourself that you should be able to see the picture on a neutral form. And therefore, when I see the entire picture, I'm able to give the proper advice. Whoever came to the Rebbe from any field, whether it was a doctor, whether it was a lawyer, whether it was a politician, whether it was a judge, the Rebbe they would always come out and say that the Rebbe added something to us. The one time, the chief supreme judge of New York State was a Yid. He calls one day, he says, I need to have an appointment with the Rebbe about a personal matter. Sure, we made the appointment. When he comes out, he tells us, after I finish my personal things, the Rebbe starts speaking to me about law. And these are the words that the Rebbe started. Your Honor, we have to rewrite the whole Constitution of the United States. I almost fell back. The rabbi is speaking about Constitution, and we have to rewrite it. What does that mean? And the Rebbe said, no, the 13 basic things that the founders of the United States laid out. The Constitution, so called, is supposed to be based on those 13 concepts. And the Rebbe said, there are numerous things in the Constitution which contradict some of those 13. And I look at the Rebbe, I say, what are you saying? And the Rebbe says, you're asking me? You're supposed to be the expert in law. I'm not an expert supposed to be. And I'm telling you that there are a number of things in the Constitution which contradict those 13 basic things. And I said to the Rebbe, do me a favor, tell me. And the Rebbe pointed out 3 things. And he showed me how it contradicts. And the Rebbe said, therefore, we have to rewrite the Constitution. So he tells us, here is sitting a rabbi, and he knows more about law than we know. When the Rebbe had his heart attack, Shemini Atzeres, so we had different cardiologists from different levels, so to say, that came to be. There was one night that the Rebbe was surrounded with 12 cardiologists. And the Rebbe is speaking to them, and then the Rebbe says, we have to rewrite the laws of physics. Laws of physics? And the Rebbe says, yes. And the Rebbe quotes a law of physics of 2 things that are operating together, how they are able to work together, that they shouldn't contradict one another. And then the Rebbe says, tell me how the heart works. And the Rebbe explained to them. He said that the way the heart functions, is that coincide with the law of physics or not? I can't forget standing in the room, and they looked at each other, like this. We are cardiologists, and we never thought of thinking about such a thing. And the Rebbe proved to us that the way the heart functions is contradicting what it says in that law of physics. Came out. The Rebbe knows about the physics, he knows about the heart. There wasn't a subject in the world that people came in learning of the Chogaret, there's no question about it. People were amazed. Rabbi Hirschberg from Montreal, Hirschberg, when he came to visit the Rebbe 2 years after the Rebbe became Rebbe, when he walked out, he said, I'm considered to be a Boki, knowledgeable in all of Shas. I don't compare to him. They asked him, what do you mean? He said, as soon as I said 2 words of a Gemara, the Rebbe finished that whole line and told me exactly in which Gemara and in which page that is. There was a Chassidish Rav, he wrote on Kabbalah, and he left manuscripts. So his children and the Rebbe wanted to print it. One day, one of the sons who was taking care of it says, we have a problem. Because on one of the pages that my father wrote, we see that there's something missing. There's no continuation. So we asked some of the big Rebbes in Borough Park and Williamsburg. They said the only one who can help you is the Rebbe. So he sends me that page, and I bring it into the Rebbe. The Rebbe looks at it for 5 seconds. The Rebbe says, go into the library and bring me these 2 Sforim. I went into the library, I brought these for him. The Rebbe opens up the page. He didn't have to go. He just opened up the page. He said, look, he quoted from this sefer. And by mistake, he skipped over 2 lines. And that's why it seemed that it's missing. On the spot. One time the Rebbe spoke a Sikha, and he quoted the Gemara. And the Bochanim, the Ingalite, weren't able to find it. So they asked the Rebbe where it is. I come and I asked the Rebbe, I said, we can't find. The Rebbe says, bring me a Gemara Baba Metzia. I brought the Gemara Baba Metzia. The Rebbe says, open up to Daf Ayin Zayin Omid Aleph. I opened up to Ayin Zayin Aleph, and the Rebbe turned his face away, and he says, look, on the 3rd line, don't you see it? You imagine? On the spot. Why am I saying this? We have to have a general idea. When we speak about these things, about the Rebbe's Nisim and Floys, about the Rebbe does not become greater. The Rebbe is a Rebbe. The Rebbe doesn't become any holier. It's only for us that we have that nature that we appreciate when we see something which is special, something out of the ordinary. So our approach, our connection is on a high level. But don't make a mistake that I'm trying to tell you how great the Rebbe is. Chas v'sholem, we should say such things. The only reason I'm bringing this out, we have to know what we possess. We have to know with whom we're dealing. We have to know how to approach such an individual who is above and beyond anything that you can imagine. This is one of the things that I agree to, that we have to try. People who didn't have that much connection to the Rebbe, and if they did have it, it was the purpose of all this is to know that when we hear something from the Rebbe, we have to know where it's coming from. What is that source? In addition, what was mentioned before, we have to know that we're speaking to an individual that knows all the ramifications. He knows all the things that it's being taken care of. And when he comes out and tells you something, he took into consideration all those things. And there should be no doubt that we have to follow it. You can continue. I'm sorry if I took up extra time.
You didn't come to hear me. You mentioned one thing, and I was hoping that you mentioned something in the middle, and I was hoping that maybe you could elaborate on it, if you can. Were there other Hasidic Rebbes and Gedolei Yisrael that sent, let's call it, issues that they themselves couldn't deal with? They sent their Chassidim or Talmidim to the Rebbe?
Yeah. The previous Sapner Rebbe, Rabbi Eilish, there were a number of people that came to get Yechidus by the Rebbe. Of course, we never questioned why you were coming. We see Ungarische people. We went with the Satmar Ruf, and the Satmar Ruf said the only one who could give you that advice is only the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Olav Sholem, used to send people to the Rebbe Benegei to Halacha. Rabbi Soloveitchik from the Yeshiva University would send people. Other Rebbes would send people from Eretz Yisrael. Everybody knew that this is the source of ideas, of knowledge on every subject, and the Rebbe has the way how to approach it. I did not mention one word of the miracles that in the course of time, which are still taking place today, where we saw open Ruach HaKodesh from the Rebbe, which could be no doubt that the only way he was able to say those things because he saw with Ruach HaKodesh. We didn't go into that. So you're asking many, with even a professor of mathematics sent one of his students about a certain problem which he didn't know how to analyze. And he knew that the Rebbe was well versed. We brought it in the next morning, the Rebbe gave it. He figured it out, he sent it. He said, I knew that he'll be able to help me. So any subject you want, people would turn to the Rebbe from all sides.
Can you share with us as well a maifis, a miracle that happened through another Rebbe or Gadol B'Yisrael that they couldn't deal with and the Rebbe dealt with it?
There was one, a non-Lubavitcher, a Chassidish family that a member of the family suddenly became very, very ill. And after all the diagnosis with all the analysis, two doctors, specialists, said that she must undergo an operation, but we can't assure you what's going to develop after that. So they decided, and they went to their Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, all I can tell you is a bracha. More than that, I can't tell you. Go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and hear what he says. They came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, first of all, I am not sure that the only way that she'll be cured is through operation, and I would hold off in the meantime from making the operation, because I feel that through medication it could be cured. And so it happened. Rabbi Berel Weissel of the Sholem used to make them Mava Malchus, and to those Mava Malchus come the alle Polish Rebbes with and whenever I was in Los Angeles, he would invite me to come. And when I came, he said I should say something about the Rebbe and tell him Meifson from the Rebbe. He was sitting at the head of the table, and next to him was sitting a Rebbe, I don't know, from Eretz Yisrael, and I was sitting alongside. So this Rebbe said, Rabbi Leibel, I'm going to tell you a story that you don't know. I said, there are many stories. He says, I have a chassid that lives in America, and suddenly he got involved in some criminal case, what you want to call it, and he went to his lawyers, and his lawyer said it's a very serious situation. So he came to Eretz Yisrael to ask me for advice and for a bracha. So I told him, here's what he told him with about 20, 25 people sitting around the table. He said, I told him, a bracha I could give you, but advice, you have to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he says, the Chusser said, the Rebbe, you're my Rebbe, not the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So I tell him, I'm your Rebbe? Yeah. Do you have to listen to a Rebbe? Yeah. I am telling you, if you want to get advice, you have to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Shame. A few months later, I was again, and he was there by Little Weiss. I want to tell you what happened. He said the Shingaman called me. He said, I came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe told me, we have a rule, Tarach gut wird sein gut. Think good, it will be good. I had to be in court Friday. I didn't know when I'm going to get home. So before I left the house, I put on my Shabbos take with Godim, my baggage with the Shreimel and everything. It was 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. I hear my wife is calling one of the children. Something happened to your father. Shabbos is coming in 7 o'clock, and he's coming ready, because I didn't want to tell her that I'm going to court. So he told his Rebbe, he called him. He said, I came to court, and I sat down, and before they called me to the desk of the judge, I said to myself, time after time, the Lubavitcher Rebbe mir gesagt, Tag geht wird sein gut, Tag wird sein gut.
The Rabbi Rebbe told me, think good, it will be good.
Think it will be good. They called me out. I come to the desk. The judge asked the prosecutor, what do you have against him? And then before he asked me, do you have a way to explain yourself? He looks at me, and he turns to the prosecutor. I think you're making a big mistake. A person who looks so dignified, looks so beautiful, I don't believe that he ever did such a thing. And he says, well, he warned, if this happens again, you're going to get a double punishment. So he called, said, so the Rebbe said, he says, you see that I told you. If you go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe will be able to help you to know what you have to do. And he did what the Lubavitcher Rebbe told him. And so we had many, many such situations where their Rebbe, next to me on the other side was sitting a young man, our Rebbe lives in Borough Park. He said, I'll tell you a story also. He says there was a bochen in Borough Park that became engaged, and although he never had any shaykhs to the Rebbe, one Sunday he came to the Rebbe before the wedding. He told the Rebbe that he's engaged, He wants to have a bracha for the wedding. And the Rebbe looks at him, and the Rebbe says, what is the status of your Kala? Was she ever married before? She's 20 years old, and her parents always never married. And the Rebbe tells this bocher, go and ask the parents of this girl whether she was ever married. He comes back the next Sunday, and they say no. The Rebbe says, go back and tell them that I want to know if she was ever married. He comes back the third Sunday. He says, I came to them. First they denied it. Then when I said the Lubavitch Rebbe will listen, they started to cry. And they said that when she was 18 years old, she was married. But after a few months, they had a divorce. Says this Rebbe, this Baruch was a Kohen. And without him mentioning to the Rebbe, saying that a Kohen, the Rebbe prevented a Kohen marrying a Gerusha. He tells the people he never saw the Rebbe never saw him before, at least Begashmias. He didn't see the Rebbe. The Rebbe gives a look at him. And why did the Rebbe say? The Rebbe could have told him right away, you can't marry. Because the Rebbe wants everything go b'derech hateva. And the Rebbe prevented him from.
The Bacher didn't tell the Rebbe.
There was another Maaseh with the Mordechai Eliyahu, former chief rabbi. There was a couple that came to the Rebbe, to get a blessing for the chasana. The Rebbe says, I want you to go to Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, and ask Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu whether you should do the shidduch. Yeah. But the Rebbe said, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu told this story himself in Brazil by a big dinner. And he says, the couple comes to me, and they tell me, we want to know when they get married. I told them, you have to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This doesn't belong to a Rebbe, it belongs to the Rebbe. We were by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he sent us to you all. He tells the crowd, I asked the young lady to go out, and I want to speak to him privately. He was about 28, 29 years old. Were you ever married? No. Okay, go out, bring in the young lady. Were you ever married? Yeah. You have a get? Yeah. Where's the get? The get is in Brooklyn. Could you call somebody and ask him to fax the get to me? Okay. He tells the crowd, one day passes, she doesn't come with the get. Another day, I called him. I said, where's the get? And she started to cry. She says, I never got a get. Oh, yeah. He said, did you hear what happened over here? The Rebbe prevented a Ashes Ish to get married. Why the Rebbe didn't do it himself, it's not my business. Here the Rebbe looks at a couple, and immediately he sees that that's not Zuckerpot, it's not the proper thing. But he wanted that a Rosh Paskin. So we could go on and on, if you want to know, day after day, when we saw in Yonim, that unbelievable, that there's one interesting story, which whoever has it is mamish in his poll. This story was told by a shaliach from Russia. He said 1 year, he got a phone call from the Rebbe's Maskirus, that the Rebbe asked him he should go to the northern part of Russia. There's a small town over there. And at that town, there's 1 year living. I want you to bring him shmura matzah. The shaliach came there. He says, Tuli finally found him. He finds a 90-year-old man. Knocks on the door. Hello? He spoke Yiddish also. What can I do for you? He said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe sent me, and he told me I should bring for you shmura matzah. The Yid started to cry. He stopped crying. He asked what it is. He said, you should know, I'm the only Jew in town. The Goyim come to me and say, why do you have to be separate? Become one big family. All the years, I pushed them away. Now that I'm elderly, I don't have anybody to take care of me. So I thought that if whatever happens, I have to have someone to look after me. If I'll be part of them, they'll take care of me. When I was young and I learned in a yeshiva, I was told that matzah shmura is what we call michla de mehemanusa. On the second night, the first night when you eat matzah, that strengthens your emunah l'kodesh baruch hu. Do you know why the Lubavitcher Rebbe sent me shmura matzah? I never saw him, he never saw me. He wanted to prevent me from doing what I was thinking to do. He wanted to strengthen my emunah. And that's why he sent me to Shmura Matzah. So the Rebbe is sitting here. This is happening in the furthest spot in North Russia. A Yid was just einer alone, nobody has any connection to him. The Rebbe sees that he can hold off. He could prevent a Yid. And he didn't come tell him, explain. He knew that the Yid knows what Shmura Matzah is. He sent him Shmura Matzah. When the Shlichim heard it, they can't understand. It's beyond any comprehension. Sitting here in Brooklyn, I say here in Brooklyn, and seeing what's all the way up in the northern part of Russia, a Yid, and the Rebbe sees and knows that he knows what Matzah Shmura is, and he knows that he's Chas v'Sholem now in a condition like this and that. The Heineke vision is a Rebbe that lives in Bnei Brak. They're two brothers.
Yisroel.
I was in Eretz when their mother passed away, and I happened to have a special relationship with him when his father was living. So I decided with Rabbi Yulislav Sinkadol to be Menachem Ovel. Came in, he was Mekadev. His brother was sitting next to him, and the room was packed with Chassidim and Rabbanim. And he says, being that so-and-so was here, I want to tell you a Maisa from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And this Maisa heard from the individual himself as one of my Chassidim. This Chassid said that he had to go for business in Los Angeles, and suddenly he had a heart attack, and they took him to one of the hospitals. There was one nurse that's a ungechepet. She wanted so-and-so. He pushed her away once and twice and three times. One night, she came in, and she says, I'm not leaving before you do what I want you to do. And he says, please, I have to think about it. 3 o'clock in the morning, phone rings in my office. I pick up the receiver, and the person on the other side says, my name is Chodakov. I said in Yiddish, I am the Lubavitcher Rebbe's secretary. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe told me I should call you and tell you these words. Get dressed immediately, don't ask any questions, don't ask any permission, and leave the hospital immediately. So the Vishnu Rebbe says, the Husser tells me, I never had any connection to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I never knew about it. I knew him, man, I never. The Rebbe is sitting in Brooklyn, and he sees that here in Los Angeles, Ken Zayn an Yid, with Chas v'Sholem, with Oiver Zayn auf Zaman Zach. In the middle of the night, he has someone to call. So the Vishnu Rebbe told the Chassidim, das heißt der Rebbe. That is a Rebbe. Even the Vishnu Rebbe himself realized we don't know what we possess. We don't know what's happening over here. It's something, as I said before, my Yaminu, my Shem, it's beyond all comprehension, there's no way to explain what that is. But we have to know. As me folgt auf den Herrn.
Please, no.
Yeah. There's a Yid that before the Rebbe became Rebbe, he used to have many meetings with the Rebbe. In 1970, he comes into the office and he tells me, I have a very serious business problem, and knowing the Rebbe, I need the Rebbe's advice. Please write down my problem, go into the Rebbe and ask the Rebbe for advice. I came into the Rebbe's room. The Rebbe was holding a letter and reading, and I told the Rebbe that so-and-so was just in the office, and he needs advice from the Rebbe about a business problem. The Rebbe takes the letter that he has in his hand, and he throws on the table, and he turns around to me with a very serious look. Du bist sicher, als wird folgen? Are you sure that he's going to listen to me? I said, I don't know. You know yourself, he tells me, that he used to sit by me many, many hours. In all the hours that he sat, he never consulted with me about his business. And then he tells me as follows. I will not answer him unless I'm sure that he is going to listen to what I'm telling him. Because if I'm going to answer him, these are the words what the Rebbe said in Yiddish. If I'm going to answer him and he's not going to listen, it'll be a must words for him. And you'll have to find out if he's going to listen. I go out and I call the Yid I said, you know, by Chassidim, everything goes with a Chassidish Maisa. I want to tell you a Maisa. I said in 1930, the Rebbe Rayaz, the previous Rebbe, was in the United States, and one of the cities that he visited was Chicago. When he was there for 10, 12 days, about 30, 40 Yidden became the Bava Chassidim. When the Rebbe came in 1940 to the United States, to New York, they would come to the Rebbe for Yom Tov Hanahin. In 1946, Toshin Vov, the Rebbe Rayatz established a Lubavitch Yeshiva in Chicago, and he sent 5 young Bochrim, 15, 16 years old, from Crown Heights, to start the yeshiva, and I was zeicher to be one of those 5 Talmidim. When we came to the yeshiva, Rabbi Weinberg was the mashpia, Rabbi Hershberg was the Rosh Yeshiva. 2 weeks after we were there, Rabbi Weinberg gets a phone call from Rabbi Chodakov that the Rebbe wants that twice a week the Bochrim should learn Tanakh, an hour and a half each time. Monday from 3:30 to 5, and Thursday from 3:30 to 5. So this Yid that they approached him that he should be the teacher, he was Boki in Tanakh up and back more than we are Boki in Ashri. He knew all the Mefarshim on Tanakh. It was by him Tanakh, oh, but Tanakh with him the whole. Oh, he was so happy. Rabbi Weinberg says, don't worry. You're going to, no, Chas v'sholem. The Rebbe wants the Bochum to learn Tanakh. I'm going to take money for that. Are you nuts? No money. I don't want to hear about it even. Came the first Monday. He opened up a Tanakh to Hosea. When he said those first 2 psukim Hosea, the walls were shaking. Mamish metazah mechayis metazah. 2 psukim took an hour and a half to explain. He came Thursday. After a half hour, we say, excuse us, you were by the Rebbe, that was his been the Rebbe for you, in 1930. Tell us some things that took place then. He started telling us ahead and ahead. When it came the next Monday, we sit down in the class, and the Yid says, listen, I have a story to tell you, but I'll tell it to you only on one condition. You're going to promise me that you're going to remember this story all your life. Now, young kids, we said, we'll try our best, but please. He says in 1930, there was a young man of about 30 years old that wanted to make Aliyah, wanted to go move and live in Eretz Yisrael. At that time, Eretz Yisrael belonged to the Turkish government. Eretz Yisrael had nothing to protect the Yid. To travel to Eretz Yisrael was a whole traumatic move. So the father tells the son, being that we have the schus, that this great tzaddik is with us, we always have to consult. Go in and ask the Rebbe whether you should make this move. And the son tells his father, nothing doing. I'm not going to ask because I'm sure that the Rebbe will not allow it to go, and I'm going. And the father tells this Malamed, I did not feel safe that if the Rebbe is here and my son is going to make this move, and my son told me, you don't ask either. I went into the Rebbe and I told the Rebbe the question, and you know what the Rebbe says? Tell your son, now he should not leave. Which means the Rebbe did not negate the whole concept of going to Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe said, now is not the time to go. I saw my son, I told him, listen, I had to ask the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, don't go now. He started screaming at me. I told him not to ask. I'm going. Came the day, 275 people went onto the ship, and 3-4 days later, boom. After he got off from Shiva, he came to the Rebbe, and he says, Rebbe, I have a very, very serious question. I understand why you said to tell my son not to go now, because he saw this tragedy. You could have saved 275 people. Why didn't you make an announcement nobody should go on this boat? You could have saved so many people. And then the Malamed stops, and he says, I'm going to repeat to you, word by word, what this Yid told me, what he heard from the Rebbe. And I'm going to first say it in Yiddish, word by word, what the Frierdiker Rebbe told us here. Gleibt mir, nicht allemal, wenn wir sagen etwas, wissen wir allein, für was wir sagen das. Es ist mehr nicht, was mir geht ins Meile zu sagen. Gleib mir, ich habe nicht gesagt, keine Tragödie. Ich habe nur übergegeben, was mit mir geheißen. Aber das wissen wir. Und nachdem, wie sie kommt heraus von unserem Welt, darf man folgen, weil wir nicht verhullen. The Rebbe says, believe me, not always, when we ourselves say something, do we know why we are saying it. It's merely that we are relating this, what we are being told from above. Believe me, when I said he should not go now, I did not see any tragedy. The reason I said it, because I was told from above, tell this gentleman now to go now. But this much we know, that once it comes out of our mouth, you have to follow, you have to listen, because if not, etc. So I told this master to this Rebbe, he says, I understand what you're telling me. I could assure you, whatever the Rebbe is going to answer me, I will follow exactly what the Rebbe says. That's right. I go back into the Rebbe, and into the Rebbe's room, and I tell the Rebbe that he's ready to listen. How did you get it? Why should it take me? Now it's better. How did you get it out of him? So I told the Rebbe, I told him a Maisa from the Frierdiker Rebbe. What story, which story did you tell about my father-in-law? So I told the Rebbe the Maisa. And the Rebbe gives me a big smile. He says, in the meantime, I have a dividend. I heard a story about my father-in-law I never heard before. No, if he's ready to listen, what is the question? I told the Rebbe the question. The Rebbe answers me what to do. What the answer is, I go out, I call him, I tell him, no reaction. I say, Yankele, the Herz was mir redt? Yeah, I hear. Thank you very much. That's all. About a half a year later, about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings in the office. I pick up the receiver. Label, Agresin Yashekayach, thank you very much. I said, what did I do for you? You have to thank me. Do you remember a while ago, I asked you to ask the Rebbe, he didn't know that the Rebbe didn't want to answer, I didn't tell him. Do you know that I asked you to ask the Rebbe a question in business you didn't want to ask until you found out if I'm going to listen? For that, I'm thanking you. I said, explain yourself. He said, when you gave me the answer from the Rebbe, this goes back to 1970, 71, his business was worth $5 million. For people in the business, $5 million in 1971 was a good sum. I thought to myself, if I'm going to follow what the Rebbe told me to do, that business will go down the drain, I'll be left with nothing. But I'm a man of my word, and I promise you, I did exactly what the Rebbe told me. After a half a year that I listened to the Rebbe, not only did I not lose my business is now worth $10 million. What did the Rebbe say? He didn't know that the Rebbe said that. If I'm going to answer him, and he's not going to follow, it'll be much worse for him. Those are the words that he told me. Had I not followed the Rebbe, I would have lost the business. What do we see over here? What are the Rebbeim trying to advise or encourage us? Without folk, you have to listen. You don't have to understand. It could seem to you it's just the opposite, just contrary to what you think it's going to be. The Rebbe knows that also. And I could go on and tell you story after story where the Rebbe said things and the people thought that who knows what's going to happen if I do it. And we encouraged them to do exactly what the Rebbe said. And finally they realized that doing exactly what the Rebbe said, that was better. That's the thing that helped them, not rather what they did before. Again, the only reason that this is again to encourage us and strengthen us more, aviful with our folk, and we have to listen to the Rebbe. I don't know how much time we have to spend with the people.
I have all night.
Okay, you have anything to discuss?
You mentioned similar stories regarding individuals. Individuals who couldn't help themselves, so they came to the Rebbe, even though they weren't Lubavitcher Hasidim. Were there any organizations?
Huh?
Were there ever any organizations, Meisdus, that weren't Lubavitch, that the Rebbe helped out? Had the Rebbe not helped, there would have been some dire circumstances?
There are many instances. I want to just give you one example, which that gives another dimension to how much the Rebbe was concerned about chinuch. We gave out the talks and tales, the Shmusim with Kinder, those Bapla, I don't know. The
Children's
Lutzvish gave
magazine.
out a journal, it was called Olamenu. The Rebbe used to get the Olamenu every time it was bought. I don't know, it was a weekly, a bi-weekly, or a monthly. Well, a period went by, and the Rebbe did not receive the Olamenu.
This is from Torah and Masorah. Torah and Masorah gave out
Masorah,
a children's
yeah.
monthly magazine.
Yeah. The Rebbe asked Rabbi Chodakov to call up the editor who was up in charge and ask why the Olamenu is not being, why he doesn't receive it. So the editor told him it's not being printed. Rabbi Chodakov asked him why isn't it being printed. He said, we don't have the money to pay for the printing, so we can't print it. Rabbi Chodakov tells what the Rebbe, he tells me I should tell the Rebbe. The Rebbe tells me, go into Rabbi Chodakov. This goes back in the early 60s around. Tell him to write out a check for $10,000, $15,000 for Torah Masera, with a note that this is designated for the printing of Olamenu. You have to understand that Torah Masera were not only not Lubavitchers, they tried to do everything to undermine what the Rebbe was doing. There were so many situations where the Rebbe said, strike, don't react, let them do what they want. But they tried in every way. Later, when the Rebbe started saying Shaluchim, they would send city into that same city, open up a yeshiva, open up a kollel to undermine. Here is a group of people that tried to do so much against the Rebbe. When the Rebbe found out that they having a chinuch problem, the Rebbe, that doesn't. The Rebbe would do everything in his power that the children of that group of people should receive their chinuch. And the Rebbe said, if that is the only source where these young children are getting a chayas, a lebetikite, hearing a story, hearing a vote that's going to help them, I am going to see that that publication is continuing to be published in Kachava. It started to be published. So if you want to know how was the action, how the relationship of the Rebbe in such a case, it happened many, many situations like that, where people, even though they were further away, and the Rebbe found out that they need either financially, if they need certain different assistance, help, the Rebbe would be the first one to assist those people. Now, by the Rebbe is given kein chalukim. The house from me, you do believe in me, you don't believe in me, you can't be chassidim. That's not Nikeya. My Albert, a Yid's Albert is to help another Yid in every way possible.
Did the Rebbe ever help any?
Huh?
Did the Rebbe ever help organizations without them knowing that the help came from Lubavitch?
Oh, both by the Friedecker Rebbe and by the Rebbe. The Friedecker Rebbe used to send to private people organizations a money order without a back address. There were families that every week they would get from the Friedecker Rebbe a check. So geht doch zu Pesach jetzt. One Erev Pesach, I'm sitting in the office, and the phone rings. I pick up the receiver. A woman on the other side says, Label, you have a very serious situation. I said, what's the problem? I live in an apartment house. The neighbor next to me, it's Erev Pesach. Usually, you smell the aroma of food being cooked. I don't smell anything. So I pretended that I needed something. I knock on the door, and I come in. The stove is empty. There's nothing cooking. She tells me. I asked the woman who, what should we do? We have no money. And my husband does not want to take any loans. He doesn't want no donations. What's for Zayin but Zayin? We have to do something. I thought on a call of a few people and make $500-600 at that time would be a substantial sum. Before I had a chance, the Rebbe called me in. So I told the Rebbe that took place, and I'm going out to call this person, that person. The Rebbe said, don't call anybody. The Rebbe opens up his drawer. He takes out $500, and he tells me, put this into a blank envelope, seal it, take a bocher, give him the address, tell him to throw it under the door, and run away immediately, that they should not know where it's coming from. A few hours later, this same woman calls. She says, I don't know what happened, but I went in, and Baruch Hashem, ze kocht sich. At the time when the Rebbe was not inside the Kedushin, but for like today, you make the, huh?
No.
We make the chuppah near the Rebbe's room. So one evening, I'm standing in the Rebbe's room, and there's a chuppah taking place. And usually, after the chosin breaks the glass, and everybody calls out Mazel Tov, so the orchestra starts to play the music. Here, the Rebbe hears Mazel Tov, he hears no music. 1 minute, few minutes, he asks me, what's happening? So I told the Rebbe, both sides are very poor, and they don't have the means to hire an orchestra. The Rebbe asked me, is there orchestra either in Crown Heights or close to Crown Heights? I said, yeah. The Rebbe says, call on that orchestra, tell them where the wedding is taking place, they should come and play, nobody should know why they're there, and they should send the bill to me, not to anybody else, not to the office, the bill should come to me.
Wow.
Yes?
Wow.
The Ingen von Hasen Alachas, the Ingen von giving tzedakah in a way that nobody should know, the Rebbe was the biggest expert in that. As soon as the Rebbe found out somebody needs something, he would take care of it. And he didn't want any publicity. Nobody has to know where it's coming from. And I could go on and tell you many other similar situations where the Rebbe was involved and took care of things, and nobody knew where it's coming from, except a few of us that was working with from the Rebbe. When people asked, I don't know, you know. So you want to know how the Rebbe would give organizations, the Fintech Rebbe organizations, private people, without them knowing where it's a blank, no checks, money orders, a blank envelope, and fartik. Wow. In Tovshin Yud, there was no shiva from men, but the Olam and the Rebbe was sitting shiva, so to say, in Hashag. People were coming constantly crying. We found out later that we got the checks from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Who's going to send us now? The Rebbe continued. Don't worry. But you want to know how it was. And we had to be very careful. Nobody should know any simon that comes from here. It had to be completely blank. It's very difficult to describe about every behavior of how the Rebbe wanted things to be done. He didn't want publicity, he didn't want anybody to know. He was involved in many, many cases. He used to call this and this person. Don't tell him that I called you. There were times that the Rebbe told us not to let this person for Yechidus. And he had to know. There was one bocher, a very fine bocher, and the Rebbe told me, halt him up, don't let him in. After a few months, the Rebbe said, he could come in. When he comes out, he says, I want to tell you something. The Rebbe told me at the end of Yechidus, don't be angry at so-and-so why you didn't come in. I had instructed him not to let you in, but you were not supposed to know it's coming from me. Wow. We had a difficult job. We took all the blame and everything else, because I was patched in the face also for that. And the Rebbe found out about it. And the Rebbe told that youth to come to 770, and after Shachas, give him a patch, bet mechila. I didn't ask for it, I didn't want it. But I was patched, I was punched. Why you let me in? Why do this? Why do that? I never told the Rebbe. Rebbe Chodakov didn't know about it. That's part of the deal. But the Rebbe wanted things to be done without knowing where it's coming from.
Rabbi Groner, maybe the last few minutes, maybe you can, maybe for the last few minutes, you could share with us. I'll ask you a few questions. I will ask you a few scenarios, in general, how the Rebbe would answer, how the Rebbe would respond, or maybe how the Rebbe would tell you to respond. General answers, not protis. Like, for example, how would the Rebbe deal with...
I don't understand the question.
Okay, I'll ask you, I'll answer it. How would the Rebbe deal with Sholem Bayis problems? A couple came to him, or a couple wrote in about Sholem Bayis issues, or Le'aleinu, a divorce issue. How did the Rebbe generally, what was the Rebbe's approach?
Okay, when you speak about Sholem Bayis particularly, the general approach when people would come to the Rebbe Sholem Bayis, the Rebbe first of all said he doesn't want that the Maskirim should get involved in it. People come and ask us, help us. He said, I don't want you to get involved. The Rebbe would say this belongs to Rabbanim. There were certain situations where the Rebbe would call the husband separately, the wife separately, and he would work it out with them. But that was very, very seldom.
But was there a general guideline that the Rebbe would give to couples?
No.
How to better their Shalom Bayis?
No. I have a Ksaviyat Kodesh from the Rebbe, handwriting from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe writes like this: Ma'anosi le'echod einoi meine u'mishu acher ki tolui beha'odom ba'amalkoim ba'hamatziv u'v'oit kama v'kama protim u'lozeh ein lilmod me'echod l'asheni. The Rebbe, I have a handwriting what the Rebbe wrote. When I answer an individual, don't take that a lesson for somebody else, because the answer is dependent on the person, on the place where they live, on the situation, and many, many other details which differ one from another. And therefore the Rebbe says, do not take a lesson from one answer. And that's why I'm very, very disturbed that lately people are giving out Sforim. Schoolers has a gula if we have for this, for that. I said, how do you... When the Rebbe told this person a gula, because he knew for him it's important, he knows how to do it. When the Rebbe gave a eitzah, because of his situation, you can't tell a person, because the Rebbe told person A, that's what person... And the Rebbe says clearly, do not take a lesson from it, because it depends on each situation is different. The Chassidim used to tell a ma'aseh that the Rebbe Marash was asked, how come on the same question that he's asked, he gives different answers? And the Rebbe Marash said, what kind of Rebbe will I be that for every question I have one answer? Because we believe that the Rebbe answered Mitzad Ruach HaKodesh. The Rebbe Rashab or the Tzemach Tzedek, I don't remember which Rebbe said, in order to answer of Yechidus, the Rebbe has to have Ruach HaKodesh. Without Ruach HaKodesh, he cannot answer, especially when it speaks about Gashmi's physical things. Ruchni is maybe. What are they telling us? When the Rebbe answers, it's without Ruach HaKodesh, because the Rebbe sees the Neshama, the Rebbe sees what had taken place within the Neshama, what could help the neshama to be rectified. So every neshama is different. Every action affects the neshama in a different way, and therefore one answer is not applicable to another answer. It has to be according to that person. And that's why the Rebbe is emphasizing, he said it many times, do not take an answer from one person for yourself. It has to be, every question has to be individual, and it has to be personal for you. If I want to answer, I'll answer. And I'm answering, it's only because this answer is for you and to your situation, who you are, what your situation is, where you live, your environment, whatever it is, all those details, as the Rebbe mentioned. It's very important to know that, because now people are looking up at this foreign, oh, the Rebbe said this, I said, that's why you have to do it. The Rebbe said, clearly, no. Unless the Rebbe says, declare that this is a Hirol Rabbim, this is what I'm giving an instruction to everybody to do this. The last 2 years, or 3 years, the Rebbe told me as follows. When people ask you about contacts, tell them under no condition...
You mean contact lenses?
Contact lenses. On no condition do I agree to contacts. When people ask you about sonograms, tell them under no condition do I agree. When people ask you about certain situation which I normally would answer, Bedikas Hatfilim V'Amezuzas, you could tell them right away in my name. In fact, when the people called, I had to put down, when I gave back the note to the Rebbe, that I told them that the Rebbe said no contacts, that the Rebbe said no sonograms, that the Rebbe said Bedikas Hatfilim V'Amezuzas. But our office was many, many times overloaded, and sometimes while we were still busy, we didn't have a chance to write, the Rebbe would call, and I'll bring out all the notes. The Rebbe's taking back the notes. He takes up one. He says, "Vos, you forgot to tell them about Bedikas Hatfilim V'Amezuzas." I looked. I said, "No." The Rebbe gave me a pencil. Put down on this note that you told them Bedikas Hatfilim V'Amezuzas. So there was the last few years that the Rebbe gave us certain general answers for which he was totally opposed. Regarding the union of sonograms, there was one day I was standing in the Rebbe's room. The Rebbe takes out a New York Times, and he opens it up to a certain page, and he gives it to me. He says, "Look what it says here." What was the headline? "Do not rush into sonograms." And there was a number of doctors wrote this article and said that sonograms could be more detrimental than without the sonograms. Speaking about contact lenses, coming to the Rebbe takes out an Israeli newspaper, and he shows it to me. There are two pictures. What does it say over there? That these individuals at night, when they took out the contacts, Le'alenu, the eye came out.
Oh, yeah.
I was once speaking, so the Rebbe said, when it came to the New York Times, so the Rebbe tells me, when I say no sonograms, no, you don't have to listen. But now that it says in the New York Times, I'll start listening. The same thing about this. When I'm speaking about the contacts, usually when I speak to the students, especially from seminary, the first question comes out, contacts. So one girl asked me, maybe there was a hard contacts. Now we have soft contacts, maybe the situation is different. So the principal says, 1 minute. She takes her pocketbook, and she pulls out a letter, and she said, "This is a letter that I received from the Rebbe some time ago." And she reads a letter. In response to your inquiry regarding contact lenses, there is no difference, hard or soft. Both are dangerous. It could cause more damage than without it, and therefore my opinion is not. At the end, he says, before the Rebbe had a stroke, the Rebbe had a stroke in Oder. In Chodesh Teves, the Rebbe told me one day that he has difficulty when he opens up the Gemara to see the small oisias. So I asked the Rebbe if he would allow. I have a big specialist, an eye doctor living in Manhattan, a Fruma Yid. Wasn't important, but he happened to be. He used to come to the Rebbe for dollars. So I called him, and he came. And while he was standing by the Rebbe, he gave him the dilation drops, so you have to wait until the eye dilates. So he asked the Rebbe, "Do I have permission to ask the question?" He says, "Yeah." He tells the Rebbe, "I know that the Rebbe is against contact, and none of the Lubavitch patients, regardless what the situation is, do I ever suggest. But there's one case of a woman that she has a very serious case with her eyesight, and I discussed it with my colleagues, and the only things that could save her eyesight is contacts. So I told her, do me a favor. I know you're a Lubavitch Chassidim. Write a letter to the Rebbe, he knows me, that he knows that I don't suggest, but in this situation, I'm asking the Rebbe to make an exception in order to save your eyesight." And he tells the Rebbe, the woman came back and told me that I wrote the letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, "Under no condition will I allow you to wear contacts." And that I'm standing there listening, and the doctor pleads with the Rebbe. He says, "Rebbe, we have to save that woman's eyesight, and we doctors don't see any other way." And the Rebbe tells him, "If she's going to ask me again, I will again tell her no. In my opinion, contacts are very dangerous and could do more harm. And I have in my office now, I try to save these newspaper articles of a big medical organization that wrote against the contacts. And under no condition will I allow her to wear contacts, because in my opinion it's dangerous. Here, a doctor is pleading with him, help this woman save, and the Rebbe says no. I was once speaking for a seminary in Paris, in France. And of course, the question came up. The next morning, they started asking me to get brachas. So I say, for a bracha, you have to do something what the Rebbe wants. So one of the students came over to me the next morning after davening, after Musaf. She says, you see, last night I was wearing contacts, now I'm wearing glasses. I had asked you to get a bracha for me to find a shidduch. I'm having difficulty. So after Shabbos, I took the name. 3 months later, I came to the Ohel, and who's standing near the Ohel? This young lady with a bracha. She comes over. I want to tell you, 2 months after I listened what you said to take off the contacts, they introduced me to this bracha, and now we're going out already 4 or 5 weeks, and we hope that we'll end the shidduch. She wants to thank me that as a result, that she listened to the Rebbe, so the Rebbe didn't become a bracha. In fact, that happened. So with this, so asking me, so there are things that we had holistic Kazakh in general, things that the Rebbe told us, and the things that the Rebbe only he could answer, nobody else. There was one anybody to answer. I told him myself from the previous the Zayde, the grandfather had to get a Rebbe, which I told this Maisa to the Rebbe. There was a Yid that came to the Gera Rebbe. He was not well at all, and he asked his Rebbe for advice and a brocha. The Gera Rebbe sent him to a professor. So this Yid was a smart man. He says, Rebbe, I came to the biggest professor. Why are you sending me someplace else? So the Gera Rebbe says there's a posik.
Meaning because he came to the Rebbe.
He came to the Rebbe, of course. So there's a posik, which we learn in Pasha Mishpatim, we learn it too, V'rapo yarape, that he should heal. Says the Gemara, Mikan, from here we learn, as nitne reshus l'reife l'rape. A doctor has permission to heal. Why? Because if the Eibishter gives you a certain situation, who's the doctor getting mixed? If you remind me, I'll tell you much with the Rebbe about this. So the Gemara says that by writing this is what the Eibishter wrote, the Rabbi, from this we learn that a doctor has permission to involve himself and take care of himself. Sure. There was another, he went to the doctor helped him. There was another chassid who had that same problem, so he decided, I already know where the Rebbe is sending, so I went to that doctor. Come to the doctor, it doesn't help. He comes to the Gera Rebbe, looks, I don't understand. He said that this doctor helps in these situations. So the Gera Rebbe asked him, did I send you to him or you went on your own? I heard what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe said, why does it say in Posek Mikan? It could have said, V'rape Yerabbe, Shenitne Roshus L'Reifel Yerabbe. When it says Mikan, when does the doctor have the power and the ability to heal? When it comes through us. When it comes from here. That's Levo. I had that phone call, and soon after the phone call, the Rebbe called me in about something. And I knew that the Rebbe had a very special relationship with the Gera. So I told the Rebbe, I have a story I just heard from the Gera Rebbe. And the Rebbe says, Avada, surely. I tell the Rebbe this Maisa, and after I finish, and the Rebbe says, Gor achsidische Wort. A few weeks later, a phone rings in the office. I live in Manhattan. I'm traditional. My husband is very sick for a long time, and the doctors are not succeeding in helping him. I was told if I turn to Rabbi Schneerson, he'll help me. So I took her husband's name and his mother's name. I went in, I gave the Rebbe the situation, and the Rebbe writes, Ka'atzas Reifi Yedid, to consult with a friend of the family. I call her back. She says, Rabbi, I went to 4 friends, and they can't help me. That's why I'm coming to the Rabbi. I go back, and I tell the Rebbe that she says she went to 4 Reifa Yedidim, And what did the Rebbe ask me? When is he gegangen? Eidin hab geschickt und noch nicht hab geschickt. When did she go to those doctors? Before I sent her or after? Let her go now, because I'm sending her. Then we can't. You have to understand what we're being told. We see him a doctor gives a koyach, and the Rebbe schickt. The Rebbe gives a bracha. That's when the doctor has success. And that's why there's so many times. This you told him as soon as he came out of Yechidus, a fantastic Mason. 2 cardiologists told him he has to have immediate open heart surgery. You're not all about what you chosid. He said, I have to get a bracha from the Rebbe. He comes out, he said, Rabbi Leibel, you won't believe what happened. I came in, I told the Rebbe the situation, the Rebbe calls me over. He says, unbutton your jacket. And the Rebbe puts his ear to my heart. And I don't see any reason for operation.
Yeah.
That's what the Rebbe said. So I told the Rebbe, but these 2 cardiologists came to come back. And the Rebbe puts his ear again to it. Since you're an operation, you don't have to make an operation. He goes back to his doctors, and he says, I'm not going for an operation. Are you out of your mind? It's so serious. He says, I went to a big rabbi, and he says, I don't need it. He started making tests again, and kachav. The Rebbe put his ear to it, and so we have so many cases where the Rebbe said constantly different what the doctor said, and at the end, the Rebbe was right. They made a mistake. They wanted to do something, and the Rebbe was lost. And as a result of that, the Rebbe saved many, many people of different situations where the Rebbe insisted, and the person, it was a number of times that women had problems when the doctor wanted to make an abortion. There's one case I was speaking about Chassidus of Malkin in Flatbush. So I told him I have a family. So a gentleman gets up. He says, Rabbi Groner, I want to tell you about that story.
Yeah.
My mother was pregnant with me. And in the 5th month, she had a lot of complications. And 2 doctors told her she must do so and so. My father came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, no abortion. She will continue her pregnancy, and she will have a healthy child. And he was a heicher, I go, you see, the Rebbe saved me. Wow. He says, I'm a witness to this story that you just heard. It was my mother and my father who came for that mice. So we had many, many such situations where the doctor wanted to do this and wanted to do that, and the Rebbe said, nothing doing. The first year, Tovshin Yod Aleph, I got a phone call from Argentina. A man calls. His wife is in labor already 10, 12 hours, and the doctor said either her or the child. So Lubavitcher Chosser happened to be walking around in the hospital. He saw her in distress. He says, call New York and ask for a bracha, advice. So I took the name and went into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, Zogem, sie wird haben ein Kind Gesundheit. She'll have a child without any interference. A few hours later, he called me. 6 months later, the phone rings, and someone speaks with an accent. He says, I am from Argentina, and I'm a gynecologist. I had a situation of a woman who was very, very complicated with different things. And I advised that either her or they came back, and they spoke to Rabbi Schneerson in New York, and he gave a blessing, and everything went well. I want to meet this Rabbi Schneerson. These are the words that he told me. He is sitting in Brooklyn, and this is taking place in Buenos Aires, and he knows what's going on, and he gives a blessing, and she has a healthy child. I must meet that rabbi. I'm going. Say Meister noch Meister mit der Rassungstochter, you know the Meister.
Who?
With the Rassungsdaughter.
No.
You don't know the story.
No.
The ambulance brought her to the hospital. They made the diagnosis, and the doctor said, it's a question of hours. He came running to 770. He tells me what happened. I tell him, sit down, write to the Rebbe. I'll go into the Rebbe right away, and I'll give him the zettel. He sat down and he wrote, and at the end of the zettel he writes, Hineni meiser es biti, lekvei kevdushos admon shlita, shemahayim v'holi hi habas shel Rebbe. I'm writing to the Rebbe from now on, she is the Rebbe's daughter. I come in, I give the Rebbe the zettel, and the Rebbe told me to call, so I forgot his name, so I remember his name. His Lubavitcher had one. His father-in-law was Lubavitcher. His Shver was Lubavitcher. He worked on the hospital that was not far from 770. He was a surgeon. So the Rebbe says, call him and tell him he should come immediately to my office. I called. So the nurse said to the secretary that he's in the middle of an operation. So I said, do me a favor, tell him that so-and-so called, and in the intermission before he starts the second operation, he should call me. A half hour passes, he calls me, and I tell him that the Rebbe wants to see you immediately. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, he's here, and he goes into the Rebbe. He comes out, he tells me as follows. She was taken to the hospital, was it not another hospital, downstate, was the other hospital, whatever it was. So the Rebbe tells this doctor, I want you to take over the case. So the doctor tells the Rebbe, I'm not a member of that hospital, and they won't allow me. And the Rebbe says, according to them, kach v'kach. So what difference it makes to them? Which doctor? I'm asking you to take care of this child. And then the Rebbe says, every evening, I want you to come and tell me what the situation is, and I will give you instructions what you have to do to save this child. Yeah? So he would come every night, and Nochazach, when he came 11, 12 o'clock, I wanted to go into the Rebbe, tell him that, no, don't disturb the Rebbe. I'll wait till the Rebbe goes home. He would sometimes wait till 2 hours, till 2 o'clock, till the Rebbe went home. When he came in to the Rebbe Thursday night, he comes out and says, Leibel, you won't believe what the Rebbe told me. I said, what won't I believe? The Rebbe tells me Friday night, Friday afternoon, order a taxi. Tell him about what time will you be finished with your Shabbos meal. Take the taxi, go to the hospital, do what you have to do, and come to my house, give me and tell me what it is, you'll get instructions, then you go back home. The rest, I said, Pikuach Nefesh, Decha Kol HaTorah Kula. This he did for 3 weeks, every single night. After the third week, I asked him, no. He says, things are going in the proper direction. 6 weeks after this happened, the phone rings. I pick up the phone. I'm Dr. So-and-so. I am the doctor that examined this girl when she was first brought into the hospital. I am the one who told the father it's a question of hours. This doctor that the rabbi sent came, he took over the case, and he was taking care of her. I can tell you without any exaggeration, this is a pure miracle of, he didn't say Tchias HaMesim, he didn't say it in
Resurrection.
Huh?
Resurrection.
Resurrection. In my opinion, and all my colleagues, this is simply a resurrection of a person who, under all laws of medicine, was gone. And here the rabbi brought her back. I'm not Jewish, but something which I witnessed with my own eyes, I have to accept it and I have to see it. You know, Maisa, in Brazil, I think. No, in Johannesburg, there was a bocher that was hit by a car, and the doctors gave up on him. The mother called, and she said, I believe at the Rebbe has a koyach that is 11 he should live. The Rebbe said he should go, I forget names of doctors lately, he should go to one of the doctors, Echot Lubavitcher.
Rodney.
6 months later, this fella came out of the hospital, a gesunter Mensch. About 2 years later, I was invited to Johannesburg And the doctors asked me I should come because they want to ask questions how the Rebbe reacted to certain medical situations, what his advice was. So as I'm sitting by the table, one of the doctors tells me, tell them what happened with this bocher. It happens to be the uncle of the bocher. So I told him. Sitting opposite me, one of these doctors, and he looks at me, he says, Rabbi, you'll have to excuse me. I don't believe the story. I said, nobody is compelling you to believe. But here's the uncle. Tell him to give you all the documents, the medical papers that were written up since the time when it happened till now, and you'll see it. A few days later, the uncle calls, and he went over and he couldn't believe what he saw. The doctor gave up on him. The Rebbe tells this doctor that he should take over the case, Mikan. This bocher started visiting different non-religious camps. And he has to speak. He goes up and tells them a story about a bocher, and then he says, you know who this fellow is? That's myself. Why am I telling you this story? He tells them, you have to believe that there's Hashem on the world. He got the boys to put on film, and he got the girls to light candles. He says, camp after camp, he said they were standing in line Sunday morning to put on the film. Erev Shabbos, they wanted to light candles. What ever made this mitzvah was not only for me. As a result, I became a shaliach to help so many Jewish boys put on film and so many young ladies to light the candles. Became this is not the next. Who knows? Story after story. Maisha Shahoya. But you have to know, when I tell a story, it's either if I personally was involved in it, I heard it from the person himself. There's a din in Shabbos, Keli Rishon Mavashal. If you have a Keli, that's in it's so it's considered Keli Sheni is Kakos. The same thing I say about a story. If I heard it from the first individual and I know who he is, I could accept it. Comes the second one, third one, this one will add on something, this one will take off something I have in. So the stories that you hear from me, at least, it's either when I personally was involved, so I have first-hand information, or heard it from the individual with whom the story took place, and I know who that person is, that I can rely on what he says. So the stories that I'm telling you are not stam mices that from fly by night. These are facts that took place. And there's so many other stories. There's a story about Arik Sharon, that one time was by the Rebbe. The Rebbe asked him, when are you flying? He said, I'm flying tomorrow night. The Rebbe says, please delay it, because I have a certain thing I have to take care of in the embassy, and you're the only one that can help me. So please delay it. It so happens that that plane that he wanted to fly was captured by terrorists. And that's how the Rebbe saved him. People went on saying that the Rebbe told him, don't take this plane. When he heard that story, he said, if all the stories are like this, I'm not going to accept. Because he told the story the way it was. He used to come to the Rebbe whenever he was in America. He would come with his wife, Lily, over his shoulder. One year, his mother, who was 80 years old, came, and he asked permission to bring her. They came about 11, 12 o'clock at night. She went in for 10 minutes. She comes out. She asked Arik, how long do you expect to be by the Rebbe? Not more than 20 minutes. They were by the Rebbe for an hour and 20 minutes. When they come out, his wife, Lily, says, I want to speak to you privately. She tells me, first of all, we have a 17-year-old son who's having psychological problems. We went to different psychologists, psychiatrists. The Lord, nothing is helping. So we asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave us very good advice. That took 20 minutes, and we were ready to go out. And the Rebbe tells Arik, remain seating. And then the Rebbe says, I want to ask you something. I'll tell you what it's about, and you tell me if you want to listen. Those are the words that the Rebbe told him. And the Rebbe says, I found out that in the government there are two ministers that are having very serious problems between themselves. And it's not healthy for a government that ministers should have such a situation. I want to give you a message to tell them how they can resolve that situation. And he tells, the Rebbe asks him, are you ready to listen? He says, of course. And the Rebbe tells him the name of the ministers, and he tells him the situation. She takes out a white handkerchief, and she said, you know that Arik is not the person who gets so excited. He became white like this handkerchief. His hands were, and he looks at me. What's the question? These two ministers have no shaykhus to the Rebbe. The only one who knew the two ministers is Arik. And I know about it. Nobody knew. We didn't write to the Rebbe. They didn't write to the Rebbe. How did the Rebbe know? And she tells me, you know, we always hear stories of I could come back now and tell my colleagues, my friends, that Arik and myself saw open Ruach HaKodesh from the Rebbe. Here's a situation of two people sitting in Eretz Yisrael, have no connection to the Rebbe. They didn't write to the Rebbe, we didn't write to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told us exactly the names of the people. He told us exactly the problem, what is going on, and what the answer for that is. I had another case of one of the ministers from Cape. He said, I was sent by the Prime Minister. We have a very difficult problem on a machlokes with one ministry and another ministry. The Rebbe could help us. And when he left, the Rebbe told him also about another situation, and he tells me these words. HaRebbe yoshev kan beBrooklyn v'yodea hakol ha'naaseh etzleinu ma'acharei hakalayim. Here the Rebbe is sitting in Brooklyn, and he knows everything that's happening between the secret curtains, which is covering up, no one should know anything. I see it with my own eyes, I feel it now. He's telling me stories, telling me a situation that nobody knows except 2 or 3 people. And he tells me the names, he tells me what's going on, and gives me advice what to tell them to do. The Mama see what's going on. Time after time after time, when people came out, they couldn't believe what was going on. And again, the Rebbe is not greater than that, the Rebbe is not Heilig, the Rebbe is a Rebbe. But we have to know that we're dealing with someone who is knowledgeable about everything. And I don't want to take up the time. There's a ganze Meiser which took place, and the Rebbe told somebody something was happening in another country Friday night. There was no telephones, there was no emails then, there was no WhatsApp, all that stuff. It was Friday night anyway. And the Rebbe says, Zogim, why am I revealing to him that I'm sitting here in Brooklyn? And this took place in Argentina, and the Rebbe used in Yiddish, Ich will, soll wissen, as von mir kann man sich nicht behalten. I want that people should know you cannot hide from me. Wherever you're going to be, wherever you are, I will know exactly where you are and what is happening. Those are the words what the Rebbe gave in the beginning. Yeah, clear that from the Rebbe himself. Ich will, soll wissen, dass von mir kann man sich nicht behalten. Mit that aus. Okay.
Rabbi Groner,
It was helpful that we shouldn't have to speak about the past. We should see the Rebbe L'mata Masarat Tvachim,
Amen.
Who you go leinu, and we should be together with the Rebbe in Eretz HaKodesh. And we shall hum the Gula Shleim Tekef Meyad.
And you should be gesund.
Thank you for your patience.